The motivation for this work was to try and see if we could come up with effective management strategies for rabbits that are based on how metapopulations of rabbits look in a landscape context. How do I change this slide? Cool.
Sorry, to use the keyboard.
I think that you have to plug this somewhere.
Oh, okay, so that might help. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So yeah, as I said, the motivation for this work was try to understand how to better control invasive species at a landscape scale. And for this, we had some data from Western Australia, from farmlands where populations of rabbits had been mapped at the property level for farmlands. And what I was interested in was to see if the structure of the connectivity of this metapopulation will allow us to better perform control management on these species. So I first started this exercise by drawing some maps of networks with different types of distributions of links across the nodes. So in these networks, nodes represent populations, local populations, and the links between them are sort of dispersal links, which in the case of rabbits would be movement of individuals across populations. So there are two main different types of networks here, exemplified by ring and ring hub, which is sort of a more homogeneous type of topology because the links are homogeneously distributed across the local populations, whereas more heterogeneous topologies will look more like these ones, star or scale-free, in which many of the links are concentrated along like central populations, and there are a lot of periphery populations. So after drawing these graphs, these networks, I simulated the population dynamics of the rabbits using a Ricker logistic equation and deriving these parameters, the growth rate and the carrying capacity, from real data collected from rabbit populations. And I also simulated a dispersal kernel with this shape, modeling the fact that rabbits usually travel a distance of between 3 and 5K, and then the dispersal kernel suddenly decays and they don't go farther than that. So after having this sort of model, what I did was to replicate a series of in silico experiments in which the way in which we choose the local populations to be managed can vary between three different things. They can be randomly picked from the whole suite of populations. They can be correlated in the sense that you pick one and then go from there to the ones that are connected to that one. Or they could be the hub. Third strategy is to pick the more central one, and then from then on going to the more connected ones. So this was done in conjunction with a series of different perturbation extents, which means the number of or the fraction of local populations that you manage across the landscape, and also at the perturbation level, which is the fraction of the local populations that you are actually killing. So here, 30% of each local population is killed, 60, 90, and so on. And this allowed us to, as I said before, to try to find the best strategy across these three multifactorial experiments that could yield better management strategies. And we tested this for for all of the landscape scenarios that I showed before, the four different network topologies. So the results for this experiment is basically that reduction in the abundances of the rabbits are better attained when you apply this sort of management to heterogeneous sort of landscapes like star or scale-free. And it's less effective only until you get to really large management extents for homogeneous types of landscapes. When you apply resource reduction, which could be considered like, for example, as warren ripping, the effects are much better than population reduction, and they work, or this strategy works equally well across the different landscapes. So after this, I wanted to know after gaining some insights from this theoretical exercise, I wanted to see how this knowledge could apply to these real populations that we had. So we had maps, as I said before, from Western Australia that look pretty much like this. And we divided the map into farmlands and considered that the centroid of each rabbit population is the centroid of the property. And then the parameters for the local populations were derived from habitat suitability. From this, we constructed a network of the interactions of dispersal between the different populations of the rabbits according to some distance, which is the maximum distance that rabbits are observed to travel, and we obtain something like this. So this picture here will be the equivalent of the other networks I showed before, but for the real scenario. And the results are basically telling us that for these sort of scenarios, when there is even only a little bit of dispersal, management strategies are really bad when you are just killing off rabbits, like baiting them, for example. But when you apply resource reduction, they become very effective. The different colors in these plots are the different management levels, so how many local populations are needed to be controlled to attain these levels of rabbit management. So the maximum abundance of rabbits, for example, in the middle row, are plotted against the extent of the management, and the three colors is how much of the population you are killing. So to some, basically the result shown here is that better management strategies, or better control is attained when you manage a lot of the population and a lot of them, which is sort of expected. But the interesting thing is the difference between managing by resource reduction against managing using baiting, for example. So what is the best strategy? As I mentioned before, it seems like resource reduction is like a best strategy, but the difference between the two, between the real populations exercise and the theoretical model actually teaches us a lesson, which is that because of the fact that the rabbits, at least in these Western Australian populations, are very close to each other, the network connectivity is like really high, so they have a lot of neighbors. And therefore, these topologies are very homogeneous in terms of their links. So when you have these sort of networks, it's really hard to find like a smart strategy to manage these populations. And that's pretty much my presentation.
That was an awesome talk. So we've got some time for some questions. So, yep.
Miguel, the long-distance dispersal of rabbits is not really very well understood, like most animals. Did you look at sensitivity of these models to different dispersal distances and how that affected the outcome?
Yeah, that's a good point. No, we didn't look at that. We just assumed that it decays as shown in the first plot. But yeah, it's something that could affect the results, especially for large levels of dispersal.
Miguel, of course this is a test and the R value is high, but I was wondering for generality, how would that difference between the effect of number of individuals versus resource control would change with different R's, with lower R's?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, especially because the equation that I use to model these populations can display chaotic dynamics after you surpass certain threshold. So this is something that I actually wanted to explore for this, but I couldn't, and something that I keep in mind for future. But at the moment, I am only using the value for rabbits. So this is good for rabbits, but might not be the case for invasive populations that have, as you say, different growth rates. Yeah.
Any more questions there? I've got one. Just in terms of, you looked at the resource reduction and you looked at killing. Did you actually look at any interaction effects between the two in terms of combined management strategies?
Yeah, I was afraid this question was coming. Yeah, a lot of people has actually asked us to do this, and that's something that we actually have as a future plan for this approach. But as of today, we still don't have any results for it. So, yeah, sorry.
All right. So we've got a minute or two before our next speaker. So if you need to shuffle off to another talk, feel free, and we'll be back in a minute or two.